Right. So let's get you started with my this tutorial on comments, variables, and data types. Now this is the third video, as you already know. If you haven't checked my playlist, I request you to check my playlist as soon as you can. I've already uploaded two videos by now, and the third video is currently in progress, as you can see. Now coming back to the first Python program I made you, right? Print hello world, right? That was it. Now if you may have forgotten what the print statement does, it's basically used to print any type of data, any text in the terminal. So that's the very reason why the print statement is used. Now let me brush you through comments. Now, why would you add comments, you may ask? Let's say you wrote a very complex piece of code 1 year ago, and now you're opening it, of course, 1 year after, and you may have forgotten what some lines of code do, because it is of course a complex piece of code. However, you may remember that when you wrote the code. Hence, sometimes when you're writing the code, it's preferred to add comments. Now, comments are basically lines that are only read by the users and whoever are coding, and not executed or interpreted by Python. So those are comments. To add comments, you basically add a hash symbol, as you can see here. Give a space, that is optional, you can directly write it. So you add a hash, and then after that you can write anything that you want to. Let's say this prints hello world, right? So that's what it does. Now sometimes you may want to add comments that are let's say larger than usual, and that's where multi-line comments come in action. Now when you add a hash symbol, it's only responsible for commenting that very piece of line. Now if you want to comment in a multi-line way, you just have to add three quotation marks or the inverted commas, like that. So Python automatically generates it for you. Now whatever you type inside it is going to be recorded as a comment. Let's say again, this prints hello world, right? Now this again is going to be a comment. Now if I run it, it'll only print hello world. It's not going to read any of these lines since these are comments. Sorry, yeah. So it's not going to print any of these lines. So that's how you use comments. Now let's say I write something. Let's say this same thing. I'll just write it again. This prints hello world. Now let's say I write this. I want to comment it without actually adding the hash symbol. How do I do that? I've already uploaded a short on this. It's a Python shortcut, sorry, PyCharm shortcut. You select this line, you click on the control and backslash. That's it. It comments it for you. Now this is how you comment using PyCharm. If you've already written a line of code and you want to directly comment it instead of adding a hash symbol or uh, using multi-line comments. Now this is useful when you have like many lines of code and you just want to comment them as fast as you can. Adding the hash symbol for every line, it's somewhat tedious, and I wouldn't recommend that. Now this is all about comments. So comments are not a very major part of your coding, but it's very useful since you can remember what you're actually coding about. Now the second thing, as I promised you, are variables and data types. Now they're somewhat related. Now what are variables? You may have heard of it in maths or somewhere. Let's just break down this word, okay? Variables. Variables can be broken down into vary plus able. Now it's so variables means nothing but a value which can vary. So variables in Python are placeholders which store some amount of data which can vary. Now this data which is stored, this value which is stored, again can vary, and it can be of different types. Now these types of data that can be stored inside variables are called data types. Now let me write this for you. Variables are placeholders which store uh, some amount of data. Second thing, data types include the types of data or information which can be stored in a variable. Now I'll tell you wait, why is this showing an error though? uh, okay, doesn't matter much. Anyhow, so before I teach you how to initialize or how to assign some values to a variable, I'll first teach you the data types. Oh wait, so oh, that was the issue. I'll just write data here again. Anyhow, so yeah, coming back. So the different so there are four types of data, right? So I have already made a YouTube short on this in my channel. You can go ahead and check that to check the data types. I'll just brush you through it quickly. Now the first is strings, which is generally written like this in Python. Now strings basically represent text value. That's all you have to know about strings. And to convert them, you use the str function, that stands for string, and they're generally written inside these quotation marks. So you either use these two inverted commas, or you use two quotation marks. So either of them can work. There's no problem in either of them. Second one, integer or integers, yeah, whatever you want to call it. Now it's written in int, which is again integers. So it basically represents uh, sorry, my mistake, represents numbers. You can of course know that because integers mean numbers. So to convert, you basically use the int function, and you don't actually have to use inverted comma for them. Now the third one are float values, which are written as FLT. Now you may wonder, what are floating point values or float values? There's a small difference between integers and floating point values. The main one being that in integers there are only values that do not have a fractional part, that is, they do not have a decimal part. So integer examples include 1, sorry, my mistake. So they include 1, 2, 3, any other number you can think of. Floating point, however, includes decimal, sorry, decimal numbers. So basically, numbers that have a fractional part. Examples include, let's say, 3.4, 2.5. Now, what you have to remember, if a number, let's say 2.0, sorry, 2.0. Now, even though is basically 2, it is basically 2. However, it does have this point 0. Hence, it is a floating point value. So this is something you have to remember. So the last data type here is of course Boolean, which is written as bool. Now you may not have heard about Boolean at first. Boolean values represent a condition. Represent a condition. So they basically tell how true a condition is. That's what they do. So there are only two Boolean values, which are true and false. Now something quick that I want you to remember: true represents 1. Actually 1 is can be represented for true, and false is of course 0. You may have guessed it. Now this is important, as sometimes you may want to convert Boolean value to integers or integers to Boolean values. Right. Now let me teach you finally initializing of variables. To initialize variables, there are three main components you have to remember. First is the variable name. Let's call a variable name text is equal to. Now this is equal to is the second component, which is the assignment operator, which is nothing but an equal to symbol used to initialize a variable. Text is equal to, let's call it hello. Now there are certain now this is basically how you initialize a variable. However, there are certain rules for initializing a variable as well. So first rule is that variable cannot start with a number. Now let me show you an example. Let's say one text, I call it, is equal to hello. You'll notice an error here. Why? Because a variable cannot start with a number. That's the reason. However, if I again write, let's say, I don't want to make it text again. Let's say I write text1. It does work because text1 is allowed. if the number comes after some string or even if it comes second, it's allowed. It just cannot come first. That's the only condition, right? So the next thing is that uh, yeah, no special characters allowed. So that's the next one. Now let's say I write text at the rate 2 is equal to, it won't work because let me just give it a value to show you. It won't work. Why? Because special characters are not allowed. The only other character except text and string, letters and string which is allowed is underscore. Let's say I write text underscore 1. Now this is allowed. Why? These are all allowed. Now I'll come to the point of how to call a variable. Because if you can't call a variable, what's the point of actually initializing them, right? Let's call a variable right now. So now I'll just go ahead and write the print statement. I'll write print text, right? Now what do you think this will print? Will it print the whole thing including the strings, or will it just print what is inside the strings? Take your time and guess it. If you said that it will print the whole thing, no, it won't do that. It will only print what is inside. As I told you, strings are called using quotation marks. So it's not counted in the actual string. Now if we run this, it will only print hello. It won't print the whole thing with these quotation marks. Now that is mainly what you have to know about variables. You can of course convert variables from these data types. Let's say I want to now, what you'll understand here is that text underscore int, if I call it, which I want to call for, let's say an integer, a variable which holds integer, let me say 2. Now when I'm calling a number that is an integer or a floating point value inside it, let's say 2.5, whatever you put, either integer or floating point value, you do not need any other quotation marks. Same thing for boolean, text bool is equal to, I can just write true. I don't actually need quotation marks, and I can print them again. There's nothing hard in that. You can do that yourself. I'm not doing it for now. Now the other thing that you have to see is how to convert them. Let's say I write text underscore int 2 is equal to okay, so as I told you, true is represented by 1, false is represented by 0. If I wanted to convert this into int, let's say I write int text underscore bool. Oh wait, I have to call it after it, right? Yeah, so let me call it here. Now text underscore bool, yeah. And if I print this, print text int 2, it'll of course print 1, because as I told you, true stands for 1, false stands for 0. This is how you convert it. I've already written here str int, then for floating point values flt is used to convert, and for boolean it's bool, right? So those are the two main things that you actually need to know about for the conversion of, not two, actually 4 main things you need to know for the conversion of variables. You can go ahead and explore different conversions of variables. I'm not going to tell you everything for now. And yeah, this is basically pretty much you have to know for comments, variables and data types. Thank you for watching this video. Please like, share and subscribe and come back for the next video. Thank you.